Good morning, everyone. My name is Tiago Palaniappan. We welcome you to the webinar on behalf of TriStar and PTC. My name is Tiago Palaniappan. I work for TriStar, TriStar being the largest reseller for PTC products in North America. Today's topic, as many of you may have attended our Thursday webinar series, we thought of doing one of the most commonly requested topics on the Creo licensing. Several topics are there, so I thought of just covering the next 30 to 45 minutes, some of the commonly asked questions on the Creo licensing specifically, and we'll also do a Q&A session towards the end. So just an FYI, this webinar will be recorded, and the recording will be made available for viewing purposes, for your company or for your coworkers later today or tomorrow. With that said, I also wanted to let you know that all of your audios have been muted, right? You are in a listen-only mode. And if you have any questions, you should see a question area or a chat session area in the GoToMeeting or GoToWebinar window. Feel free to start typing those questions as I'm doing the presentation. So towards the end, I'll try my best to answer all the questions you may have with respect to the Creo licensing. Before we begin, just a couple of points here on some time-limited offers that TriStar is running this quarter, mainly on the Creo license. When you buy one, you get a second at 50% off, and also a few more on the workstation, on MathCAD, on the ThingWorx Navigate licenses, right, and also on training and training on PTC training. So if you want to know more information about this, you can either visit the link provided there, or please reach out to your account reps at TriStar, and they can elaborate more on these time-limited offers that are running through the end of September. So from an agenda standpoint, I wanted to just cover some of the most commonly asked questions, mainly by new customers as well as existing customers, right? You may be using Creo or the old ProEngineer Wildfire, but you need to update the license server, or you need to update the license. You may have to just set up or move a license from one computer to another computer, right? You decided to change your server. Or sometimes it could be that you want to better utilize the extensions that you have purchased from PTC or from TriStar, wherein you may want to better utilize that, so the users that will not need those extensions, they don't have to simply hold that license. So I wanted to just cover some of these key things that I've listed here, and also maybe talk about some of the typical issues that you run into on the client side, mainly on the Creo licensing side, and what are the typical solutions, or how do you troubleshoot them, and also the license borrow, the new home use license. When you buy a subscription license, they give you the home use license. What are the, we'll just go through some of the options here, including license borrow is very commonly requested by our customers when they travel, so I thought of covering that as well. And how about tracking the license, right? Quite a few options, a lot of third-party tools. We'll talk about that briefly, and anything else, right? So we do have a Q&A session, so feel free. Once I cover all this, I'll try my best to answer all the questions that you may have on specific to the licensing on Creo. So first off, just many of you may be existing customers, some of you may be new customers. So PTC did change some of their the license management tools a little bit over the last few months. Some of you may have noticed that. It's a new layout and everything where you do all in one place. Having said that, if you're an existing customer and you are on support and you do have to simply update the license file or download or retrieve an existing license file, you just simply go to the license management and put in your host ID or MAC address of your license server, right, and then download it, and it will email you as a zip file or as a text file. they will send you a couple of files, and we'll talk more about those two files. Why would I use one versus the other? But that's for existing customers. If you're a new customer, you just purchased a new seat, right? You don't have a license server running, like the FlexNet license server is what PTC uses, right? So if you don't have that, first of all, obviously you'll have to create your PTC.com account. And once you create an account, a PTC.com account, and you can associate your service contract number, SON number to your account. We can even have PTC set you up as an online supervisor from a licensing standpoint, so you get to configure license, you get to move licenses, etc. Right? So for that, you would use a quick licensing option, wherein, again, you would just type in your SON. If that SON number is already installed, or if it's expired, or if it's available to be installed, which would be the case for you guys if you have already, if you just purchased it, it will clearly give you like different tabs, and it'll walk you through the process once you put in your SON number, right? And once you go through that process, I'll show you the steps in a bit here. But once you're done with that, they are going to email you a couple of license files, the text one and the standard one. One allows license borrowing, the other doesn't allow license borrowing. That's pretty much the difference between the two. But we'll talk about a little bit more about that when we cover the license borrowing. So the way that you retrieve or download a license file is essentially typing in your MAC ID, right? As you know, it's a 6-digit hexadecimal number, right? So you can, as you can see there, and then you just hit download, and usually the PTC license management should send you it like in a couple hours, right? An hour or two, depending on the queue, right? You could even call them, and with your case number, you can call them and you can check the status if it's getting too late. You might want to also check your spam folder, or if you have any filters set up in your Outlook or in your emails, you might want to check that too. But yeah, they should send you one, if you have an existing account, it's already installed, you just want to retrieve maybe an updated license file, and you just want to see what contents or what are the license features you have, you could just download that license file. If you want to do the quick licensing, like I said, the first step is to obviously make sure that you log in to go to ptc.com, and you'll see license management under eSupport. And then once you log in, there's a nice layout here that has license actions, asset management, additional resources. They also have an FAQ. In fact, many of these that I have taken is from the PTC FAQ. If you have not seen it already, some of these screenshots that I've taken. So once you type in your sales order number, once you log in first and you type in your sales order number, like in this example here, the next step would be that the system should populate like multiple tabs. I know in this screenshot I have available license tab, but typically it'll have an expired one, right, an installed license tab. So this is telling me that this particular sales order number is yet to be installed. It's available to be installed, right? That's really what it's highlighting below, where each row, it's kind of telling me the products I've purchased, right? The piping, cabling extension, parametric, MCAD, what have you, right? So it gives you the entire list in there. And before configuring it or installing it to a MAC address, I would recommend clicking on those little plus symbols just to kind of expand it, because many times we get, you should know kind of what features are included inside of each package, right? You may have purchased a bundle, or you may have purchased individual floating extensions, or even a locked seat, right? So depending on that, what you'll have to do is so here, compared to this previous slide here, you see when I click on this little plus, it gives me an expanded list of what exactly is included when I get a PCX or a piping and cabling extension, for example. Schematic slide is included, and the piping and cabling is also included there. So these two, you can think of them as serviceable item versus the product, right? So that's just some naming conventions here about the product itself is a package that you ordered, right, For example, it could be Creo Parametric Essentials 1 or Essentials 2, or it could be Engineer 1, Engineer 2, what have you, right? Depending on what you selected, that's the product. And when you expand it, you should see the items or the actual serviceable items inside each product, right? Now, once you do that, the next step is, you are obviously going to select, so you're just reviewing, absolutely making sure that your sales order number packages that you see here kind of matches with the purchase that you did, right? Otherwise, you can, contact, the rep, you can contact TriStar, you can contact PTC, depending on where you purchased it from, and they can just make sure that at the system end, if there's any corrections need to be done, they can take care of that. The next step is you select those specific products, right, which automatically picks up the serviceable items, and then you say install the license, right? So when I say install, please remember I'm really not installing the license server per se on the license server. All I'm doing is I'm configuring it. I'm essentially generating the license file, right? I know you could just call PTC's tech support, just select the option license management, and you could do that. But it might, it's pretty, straightforward actually. Once you know the MAC ID, once you have selected your license server, the next step is pretty straightforward here. You just start off by installing the license. So when you say install license, it is going to allow you to type in your MAC ID. So when you click on that field, it should give you the list of existing MAC IDs that your company has been using. So let's say you are an existing customer, you have been using the old Pro Engineer, the prior Creo releases for a few years now. The system should have, if you are tied to your customer account, right, if you have a customer account, it should automatically pick up all the MAC IDs, right? It should list in there, from which you could choose from, or many times it may be that you are deciding to configure this particular package for a certain engineering business unit that decides to have their own business, a license server. You could just create a new MAC ID. I'll talk about a little bit later, where you could go to asset management and essentially create the MAC ID, create new MAC ID. Some of you may prefer a triad server compared to a single license server. All that can be set up. You will just need to get the name of the computer, right? Mainly the MAC ID, right? That's what your license is tied to, right? The actual physical Ethernet, adapter, the actual. I'll also get into how you can get the actual MAC ID quickly. If you're not IT enough to know that, it's pretty straightforward. You can do an IP config all, and you can get that. But sometimes you may be confused as to which ID is PTC looking for, right? And you may have some additional wireless connection, your local LAN connection, and which one should you be looking for? In fact, there is a utility to really even give you the exact one. In fact, when you start installing, also it'll pick up the MAC ID of the server. But up front during the installation, you should have that. If it's a new one, you can create a new one. If you're going to create a new one, like in this case, it's going to prompt me to select a contact person, which would be one of the online supervisors of the company, right, that you may have designated. That's something, you can, they have web account support where PTC allows you to edit even the contact. So maybe the previous admin is no longer with the company and you want to remove access for him as a new admin. You can do all that, right? You can remove contact. There's contact management, asset management, all that inside of this the new layout they have for license management. Okay. And you can also select the ID, right, the site ID. So here's an example where it is kind of giving me a review before I confirm, right, as to absolutely make sure here I've picked two quantities. So that's also important, right? You may want to put in two floating licenses of Creo Parametric to this MAC ID. However, you may want to put the remaining 5 that you may purchase, 7 of them, that to a different MAC ID. You will have to do that as a separate install, right? So this is essentially installing the license for this MAC ID at the system end, and PTC is going to email you that license file for that MAC ID. So similarly, so this is very, very important that when you had that initial package, you look at the quantity, right? You look at the features that are serviceable items inside the package, right? And once you're done with that, when you hit confirm, right? Say I hit confirm on this, it is going to give you a case number. You may want to take a screenshot or maybe note that down. Typically, it'll email you as well, right? They should email you automatically. But in case it went to your you didn't get the email, better to note that down or take a screen grab of that. And then it should come up in the hour, right? Within the hour. I've usually seen it's sometimes it's like 15 minutes, within 5 minutes. It just varies. You could even call PTC license management, and then you can check with them the status. So that is for an existing customer, right? Wherein you're just trying to retrieve, installing a new purchase that you did. Now, another situation may happen wherein you're decided to get rid of your existing license server and you're planning to use a new server, right? Obviously, it has a new MAC ID. So there are a few things to be done here, right? The first step is obviously to generate the license file for that MAC ID, right? Which we can just do a simple move, right? Used to be the reconfigure option back in the early Pro E days, and now we just, it's just pretty much the move. It's both are the same. PTC just, again, the way that you would start moving that is go into ptc.com, go to license management, right? Type in your under quick licensing, type in your SON number. If you don't know your SON number, just let us know and we can help you out, right? In our internal system, we could have, or you should have seen like a shipment information from the rep on that one, right? You can get that. Once you get that, or once you type in the SON number, this is what I was getting at earlier. Remember how I get two tabs now, available license and installed license, right? I got two tabs there. So I would obviously, if I want to move something, I'm going to go to installed licenses, right? Available licenses, maybe I've not yet configured some of them, right? When I go to installed licenses, I should already see a list of features and products and serviceable items that are already tied to the MAC ID, right? Again, you have an advanced search, as you can see the top image here, or at least the top area of the image where you could go search, look up by sales order number, service contract number, and if you are using the new subscription-based licensing instead of the perpetual, right? And nothing really changes. You still manage it using this this license management tool, and you can type in your subscription number. You can even search by asset tag. We'll talk about asset management also in a little bit here. But once you do all that, what you're going to get is, when you go to installed license, you essentially select the features. In your case, most likely you may want to select all the features, right? Or I should say all the products or the packages to this new ID. So it's currently showing the 0008. That's the old MAC ID that I'm going to get rid of, right? That license server, and I'm going to just hit move. Once you hit the move license, it's again going to allow you to specify a target MAC ID or a license server machine, and for that, most likely it may not be an existing one. You may be creating a new one, so you will be creating a new one, right? So you'll be typing in a new MAC ID where essentially you are going to include the contact information, the address, all that for that new MAC ID or for this new asset, if you will, right? Once you do this and you hit the move license, before confirmation, it is going to, very important step here, it's going to ask you to confirm to deinstall the existing license server from the existing old license server that you're planning to abandon, right? So that's something you would have to do at this point of time, right? So it's going to, give you that, and then as a online supervisor, you're confirming that yes, I will no longer use that license server for that previous machine, and it's going to be moved to this, and then you hit confirm, and then it just gives you an email, and the same thing like earlier explained, with the number, with the support number, and you should get an email with a new license file. You could also use, some of you may be familiar with the old Reconfigure link. We still have it. I think I really like this new methodology, or this new place where everything can be done in one place, right? You can rev up licenses, you can move licenses, you can install licenses. But if you prefer the old one, just click on this link, and some of you may be familiar with this, where it'll ask you to move license. You just say from to, right? This is from a triad. Some of you may be using a triad license. Some of you may be using single license server, right? And once you do that, you can even deinstall licenses, right, at this point, or using this link. And it'll walk you through the same similar steps, but it won't be this interface, right? That's one option. That's an alternate option, if you will, right? A second option there. Now, another common thing that many of you may want to do is Creo 4 just came out, or Creo 3 just came out, and you're probably still using Creo 2.0. You decided to update, to the latest release. Before you install Creo, it's very important that you update your license file. So license files are downward compatible, but not upward compatible, if that makes sense. So what I'm really getting at is, if I have a license file that is having a license version number tied to Creo 2.0, right? In that case, it will, if I install Creo 3, it will immediately give me a warning. We'll talk about this troubleshooting too, that it's incompatible version for this license file. It's not compatible with the version that you installed and all that. So, but you could do the reverse, where you could have an updated license all the way to Creo 4.0 or Creo 3.0 or whatever the latest is. Right now it's 4.0, but you could even run Wildfire 5 on that, or you can run Creo 2, Creo 3, any of the lower releases, as well as that release. So it is kind of downward compatible that way, right? So here it's telling me, again, can you see installed licenses? It kind of gives me the revision right here, right? You could see right in here, it's kind of highlighting what revision. So that's Creo 2. So I need to select the objects, or again, the products. And then just like moving, I'll have an option to rev up the license. Now, I know this has to be done automatically if you are on maintenance or support, but I've seen it many, many times these days where when you're retrieving the license, it just retrieves the existing version that you last updated. So better to do this rev up, or you can also request PTC to do this, but it's a simple thing, right? You can, if you're the online supervisor, why not manage it yourself, right? So select that, you rev it up, and then since you're selecting a product underneath a family of products, right, it'll ask you to select what is a family. So is it going to be Creo, or going to be whatever release, right, Creo? So, or could it be MatCat, or it could be Creo Simulator, Mechanica? So you have to select that product so that the system understands to go up to the latest version available. So this is a screenshot, obviously taken before Creo 4 was released, and you can see how Creo 3, it is saying you want to rev it up to Creo 3, and then you pretty much update that, and it'll send you, it'll say it'll thank you and all that. So you'll have to just re-download it, right? So all it's doing is rev up. So please remember, unlike the last few scenarios, revving up doesn't mean that you're going to get an automatic license file from PTC. You will have to now go to download, and then again do the same thing, retrieve license back. Just remember that. Now, some of the other common questions we get from customers about asset management, right? When you go into this license management tab, you want to maybe change the address. You have a new business unit, or maybe the contact person changed. You want to give access to some additional users to be online supervisors, right? You could do that. You could even have PTC do it, but it's pretty neat, nicely laid out actually, right? You could go to hardware management, and that's where you keep adding your host IDs, right? So instead of doing it on the fly while installing the license or configuring the license, how about doing it up front, right? You could do that. So here's just a couple of screenshots here where I went into creating a new address, right? I can edit the user, I can make him inactive, right? All that you should be able to do. And this is where you go to the hardware management, where you type in the host ID, the host name, the site, and the contact name there, right? You can also do a triad or a single server, right? It's a single host ID or a triad. If it's triad, you got to give information about the 3 machines, as you can see here, right? So, and then you just create that asset, and you start linking it to additional licenses during the license configuration, okay? Now, we keep talking about host ID, right? I think most of you may be aware of host ID, but it is really the MAC address, right? The actual physical address is what we want, like in the screenshot you see there. Now, again, when you do an IP config all, you open up a command prompt and do an IP config all, If you're an IT person, you already know this, and you know which ID, what you want to pick, obviously, right? Which physical address. But let's say you are a smaller company wherein you don't have a lot of IT bandwidth, and you are the engineering manager, or you are the administrator, or you are even just the user, right? You are the primary user, and you may have to do this. I would recommend, I mean, you can do ipconfig all, and you can call us and we can walk you through that, but it's a good practice to download a utility called CPU_ID from ptc.com. If you go to the knowledge base and just search for host ID, how to determine host ID, they have an executable wherein you just run that, and it will tell you what is the ID. So you don't have to, you're saying, so many of you may think that you're not IT enough to know all these ipconfig all, and just go through all the different hexadecimal numbers you get. You could just use the utility, and that will give it to you as well, right? Okay. So and another place is when you install it itself, it's going to tell you what is going to be the license server ID. When you install it, the installer will tell you too. But this is upfront if you want to know, right? For the asset management piece, right? That's when you could use that. Let's talk about some of the issues. Let's say you got the license from PTC, right? You moved it, you installed it, what have you. You got the license from PTC and you're about to install it. One common issue that I've seen with many of our customers is they have an old FlexLM or the old FlexNet. Now it's a FlexNet admin, right? In fact, for Creo 4, you need a minimum of 11.1. The one that I show you on the screenshot, that's a version you needed a minimum, right? But let's say you're working on Creo 3 or Creo 2. You're on Creo 2 and you want to update to Creo 3. As always, it's a good practice to have the latest version, right? I know there's quite a few issues with Creo 1 and 2 FlexNet versions, and we used to recommend using even the Wildfire 5 versions. But nowadays it is stabilized. But having said that, there has been situations where if you go to your program files, you may see an old FlexLM folder, a FlexNet folder. And it's a good practice before even you start installing to go to features and programs and just search for PTC on the corner, and then it should highlight, pretty much give you all things installed by PTC, right, or from PTC product line. And sometimes you may see multiple FlexNet versions. You may see FlexNet admin version, then you may see the old FlexNet server. You may see the FlexLM tools, right? You see. So this is something that you may have to avoid, or at least uninstall that first, right? That's very important because there's going to be this root cause of many license server issues wherein you have not disabled an old license server and you have a new one. Now, those who are new customers, this shouldn't be an issue. You can obviously double check if there's any old FlexNet, or maybe you're using some other CAD systems and they also use FlexNet. You can always double check what version, so you know what you're updating to, etc., right? It's a good practice to always check this first. And then during the installation on the server side, you are going to drag and drop the license file that PTC sent you into the source field. I've seen many people try the simple license entry or advanced license entry. What the simple license entry is supposed to do is you type in the SON and install licensing, and it's automatically going to have you do your login, the MAC ID and everything, but I recommend doing all those as far as you can in the license management website of PTC, and then during installation, all you do is you just ignore this top region here and simply drag and drop. And when you drag and drop that onto that field, sometimes when you drag and drop, you'll see nothing happens on the status. You might have to go back and again drag and drop. You may have to do it a couple of times sometimes. With the old versions, with the new version, it seems to be okay, but just remember you can either drag and drop or browse. You have a little open window there and just browse the text file. It no longer references that text file. So you could have the text file. I have it in my desktop, as you can see here when I dragged and dropped it. You could have it anywhere. It doesn't matter. We would recommend obviously storing these files. You have it in your email, but in some folder, but it's not referencing that. The whole point of doing this drag and drop is to install the FlexNet license server, and it generates a license.dat file that the system is going to use for this licensing, right? That's the intent of this, right? Again, when you're installing Creo, even on the client, you may accidentally do this, and I know it's going to warn you with wrong MAC ID, but you don't want to install the license server. You should be installing the client, only a Creo, right, on the client. So just remember that. And once you're done with that, once it does the installation, you should see something like this, right, where 7788 is a port that we use. So you may want to let your IT know about that, where 7788 ports is a port that we use for interaction between the client and the server. So they may have to, some of your IT may have to apply firewall exceptions, and if they have an antivirus, they may have to apply exceptions to the 7788 port number, right? There are ways to even change the port. PTC Knowledge Base has some options to even set a different port, but we recommend, the default is 7788 at the local host. Now, sometimes if you are not using a server, it's just your own laptop, you're doing this installation, I've seen where you may have to not type in the exact name, it won't work. You'll have to type in the IP address. So it says 7788 at 101, whatever the IP address is there for your computer. Or you could just say localhost. If it's a local host, you could just type in at localhost. It should pick up the local host there, right? And it should say available, right? And again, there are so many troubleshooting issues here. We'll cover that too. We'll talk about all those some resources that we can help you as well as PTC on that. One important thing during the installation or after installation. Now let's talk about the usage, right? Let's say you have some users using Creo and they're not able to access copy geometry, or they're not able to access cabling or a style feature. The reason could be you have purchased all the licenses, but you're expecting all the features that you purchased to automatically be configured, and that is not, right? It doesn't happen that way. It's just using the base license for startup. So you got to hit the Customize button, and when you hit the Customize button, it essentially allows you to do some command configurations. We call them the startup configurations, right? This is very important, where you are essentially making sure that your company is efficiently utilizing the licenses that you purchased, both the base license as well as the purchased add-on licenses, which you may not have as many, right? You may have just a few. So you can edit. First thing is you may want to edit this and make sure that if you're just making sure that you need all the extensions that you purchased to be used, to be made available during when the user uses it, remember to make sure that it should be blank on the available licenses. You see there are 3 boxes here. The available license on the left-hand side is telling you what is included in your license file. However, it's not yet configured for this particular client. This is very useful. The reason is you could have a user that's not going to be using advanced assembly extension or a advanced surfacing license, but some other users would like to use it. So there are a couple of ways of doing it. You could either prevent them from even having that in the first place by leaving it on the left side, or you could create new startup configurations. We'll talk about that too. But the goal is to move all of them on the right-hand side. If let's say you moved all of them to the right-hand side, in that case, like I've selected all of them doing a Control-A in my case, and I want everything that I purchased and I have it in here. This way I know when I use the software, I will use all those add-on extensions. There's a very common issue we have seen with many customers where they're not able to do mechanism. Mechanism design used to be a separate module. Nowadays it's included, but it's still a separate feature. You updated the license, but when you updated the license, PTC it knows to automatically bring in the startup license here, right? It could be Essentials or a Foundation license, what have you. But your add-ons, that will still show up here. So it's very important that even for an updated installation, you move these to the right-hand side so people can use it, right? Now, let's imagine a scenario where you do want the ability for the user to select what license configuration he can use. When he launches the software, he may want to just select, I want to just select the base Creo, or I may want to select no ISDX or with ISDX. It could be several like this, right? So how did I accomplish this startup configuration, right? I went into, obviously, my Creo, right, on the client side. You can quickly do an open file location from Creo, run the reconfigure.exe, and once you run the reconfigure, just keep hitting next until you hit this Customize button again, and when you hit that, you would get back to command configuration. Instead of editing, you could keep adding as many configurations as you want. So here I'm adding a configuration called Creo no ISDX, right? So remember, there's a name and a description, right? That's kind of what displays when somebody launches Creo. The next time they will get a choice. Before Creo launches, they will get a choice. So you are configuring ISDX is something that if they don't wish to use, you could just leave it on the left-hand side here. That's why I said no ISDX. I create another one with ISDX on the right-hand side under startup extensions, right? Similarly, you can even reorder. You see that? You may have sometimes a Creo Essentials team. You may have a Creo engineer. You may have different modules with different capabilities. You can even reorder them. Or you can even move some of them to the left, some of them to the right. So essentially creating an environment where the users get to select. So now you see I have two additional configuration startup files compared to my default, and I can even copy this to all the clients. You don't have to do it in every single computer. So right now I have in my bin folder, you see how I have several BSFs and back files right there. So each time when I launch Creo, it's going to refer to this, and I can just select whichever configuration I want. In fact, I can even use it when I do a license borrow. So speaking about license borrow, when do you do a license borrow? Most of you may be using a floating license, wherein you have a license server and you're within your company's LAN environment, where your client has to have the ability to ping the server and back and forth. So that's how it's a floating license environment, right? And you're effectively utilizing your licenses, right? But what happens if you want to travel to a customer site and you don't want to connect through VPN and then go through the VPN issues that you may be running into? You could borrow the license. So the way that's done is on the client side, before you travel, obviously, let's say you connect to your laptop, it's connected to the server, run the borrow batch file, and you can go borrow even 0 days, like 1 night, 2 nights, or I could go 1 day, 2 day. And there are some environment variables that allows you to even increase the default borrow. I believe it's 15, the default, but you can increase that beyond that. The thing is, you will not be able to release it earlier unless you do. There's a workaround for releasing it earlier. I'll talk about that in a bit. One common thing that we have seen when you do a license borrow is you've done the borrow and you launch it. You try to launch it disconnected from the server, right? Just disconnected from the server and then trying to launching it standalone. Your Creo might fail with this license issue. License borrow support not enabled. This tells me that your admin or IT, whoever installed your license server, they decided to install the non-borrowable license, which is a standard. Remember I told you get a zip file containing 2 license files, and there's one has a keyword borrow in all your license features. That's why it's borrowable. So they can determine, right? Obviously, it's a company policy. Different companies have different policies. Where do they want the engineers to be working offline, or do they want to work it online, right? That determines. So the IT determines that pretty much. So you might want to check with them if they're using the right one. They may have to reconfigure your license server and use the right license file, drag and drop that, and then borrow it again and it'll work, right? One common question that we get is about returning licenses earlier, right? By default, like I said, if you set it for 5 days and for whatever reason your meeting is done, you're done with your meetings and you're back in a couple days, you will not be able to return it earlier than what you borrowed. That's a default. However, there are a couple of things, there are a few requirements. If you want to do an early return, you'll have to remember to make sure that the FlexNet admin license server version is 11.10 and .1 or later, right? That's when they enable this. And you have to do a couple of things, one on the client side and one on the server side, where you have to edit this XML on the server side and allow and change the false to true, the license reclaim, and you also have to set up an environment variable on the client side and say, I want to just allow early return, right? That's something that you'll have to set it, right? Once you set this, Remember, this is very important that you do it before initiating the license borrow, right? It's no point in doing it after it, right? And then starting now, nowadays PTC has this home use license. It's an alternate option, obviously, wherein it's a different. I shouldn't say it's an alternate to license borrow. It's a way of PTC to allow the same user to work on the production work using a home license, right? So when you do a subscription purchase, you do get the home license. So depending on if you have a locked seat, it's one. If you have a floating seat, you get couple of home licenses. And there's like PTC literature on the policies and everything. You may want to go through that before you install it. But it's very important that you use it specifically. That same user has to use it. That's very important. It's not, shouldn't be used as a way to add additional users, obviously. Okay. The last thing here, the topic before we do the Q&A, the tracking, the license usage. That's something that's been there. Many of you may be using it. If you want to have a snapshot of the current license usage, I'm not talking about history or anything, current license usage, who's using what. You would just go PTC status, right? You can either go to the bin folder and run the PTC status, or just open a command prompt and then do PTC status. If it fails or if it doesn't come up with anything, right, just remember to check the environment variable path. I've seen that where you don't have access to that folder, or maybe the path is set in the wrong location, and then it doesn't understand what is PTC status, right? That's a batch file that needs to run, wherein it plots out something like this, right? Or it pretty much lists something like this where the license server is up, who's using it, how many are free, etc. What if you want to have the license usage across the company for the last, I don't know, a couple of years that you have been using Creo? You may have seen that whenever you go to the license management folder, you will see a folder, licensing folder in the old LM grid, and nowadays with the new FlexNet admin, you should see a logs folder. If you open that .log file, it pretty much has all your interactions that your users have tried to access something, or they were denied, or how much time they're using it. Now, PTC doesn't have obviously a customer-facing tool to plot these, but you could at least, if you could send us the log file, we can quickly at TriStar, we could just run this utility there and then give you a report, kind of like just to kind of give you an idea on the usage, the number of denials, etc. And you may be able to do that yourself with some scripting, but you can, it's essentially converting those log files to a nice little spreadsheet like this, right? You can also use a performance advisor. That's what I would suggest, wherein it gives you even in-depth feature level usage, right? So it's almost like, what feature is being used by which user most, what is the percentage, and in order for performance advisor to work, though, you have to have at a minimum of those, Creo 2 and Creo 3 with those date codes, right? That's when they support performance advisor. So you can see how it even gives me what commands I'm using. So maybe I can even think about, right, I could say, okay, maybe these users don't use this commands as much as they should have used, and it gives you a lot of possibilities to improve, right, to make your company efficient from a usage perspective, right? And then you also have the hardware compatibility. There's a lot of things in Performance Advisor. We could probably do another day with another webinar on Performance Advisor. I'm thinking where you just go through these dashboard options and what they give you. But since I thought of mentioning that, now that we're talking about license usage, one common question from many of our customers is, right, when you retrieve a license file or you retrieve the CDR, the detailed report, the customer detailed report from PTC, you get an Excel spreadsheet with all the options, but what exactly is included? What is the history? And I mean, PTC has the knowledge base has a lot of information, or you can let us know. Just if you want our help to map, okay, so it used to be Pro Mechanica structural simulation before. Now it's something like a basic Mechanica or an extension. What are mapped to what? And we can kind of help you through that. That's something very commonly asked, like, for example, here, right? What is really included in Creo Engineer 1? I used to have the Flex 3C. Now I'm planning to do something, going to another module. On the sales side, they can definitely help you with this. I'm just saying on the knowledge base does have information about detailed optional features included in each module, etc. Right? That's something that I would recommend going through as well before you do the installation. Right? And one common workaround that I told to many customers, I myself use it during my industry days, is you're trying to update your license server with a new license file, and you drag and drop the new license file. It just sits there, does nothing. And the way that you work around that is obviously you can uninstall and reinstall, but there is a folder called licensing folder, and there is a license.dat file. That's the file that the software is using, right? We can edit that, and your new license file will not have the host ID and some information here. You can just try to do a manual copy from the old one. You see the bottom image is the one that I had for my old license. I've just cleared out some of my host ID and everything here, but I would just copy paste that into the new license.txt and rename it as .dat, and then stop the license server, restart the license server. Or you can go to the services and just lmadmin, you can stop and start. And that's it. You don't have to worry about reconfigure, drag and drop, and all that. So that's a workaround if the reconfigure doesn't work, okay? And one other common thing with licensing I've usually seen is the version, right? The user launches Creo after installing Creo 3, 4, what have you, and they get this issue about license file does not support this version. So this tells me that your license file is probably set out only up to 34, right? But then you're trying to launch Creo 4. Creo 4 is 35. So every license feature has a version. You see from all the way from the old to Pro V, everything has a version. So if I have a license file that's having 34 version, all the below should work, is what I'm saying, right? But if I have 33 version, Creo 3 and Creo 4, will not work, right? So just remember, so you have to, this is very critical that you update the license file first, rev it up, download it, update the license server, and then do the installation, okay? And one of the very common thing on the simulate side, you have all the right licenses, but it keeps telling you that, Creo simulate cannot find license. And you're going, okay, if you have a license. So sometimes what happens is there is like a mech folder, a specific folder where they have another feature.dat for the Mechanica or simulate licensing. It may just not write these license feature names. So you may have to manually edit that or add that from your existing current license file. So expand your license file, look at all the features. Some of you may have struck UI, ENG, depending on what you purchased, but you could just type that in, restart Creo, and you'll be fine. A very common thing on license request failure is vendor daemon is down. I'm pretty sure many of you may have come across this at least once, or depending on how big your company is with a lot of servers, with servers and a lot of clients. There are several reasons for it actually, right? I would start maybe by starting the lmadmin. I would look at the line, the PTCD line that they mentioned, the last point there. I would also double check if your license server is even up and running. Sometimes, right, that itself is you can do a PTC status and it'll say it's not running, and now you know it's a server side issue and not a client side issue. And so there are several listed items here where we have seen where you did a server update and something changed, the MAC ID changed on your license server, and now you'll have to do a move license in order for this to work. So now the server's no longer up and running, right? Or you updated your antivirus or firewall settings, the new IT policy, and then now it's blocking 7788 and it's preventing that. In that case, you won't get this, but it'll say failed to connect. But all these, you have to. There's like a lot of documentation on this. I have all this, even in the knowledge base, and we have documentation that can help you, or we can just get on a quick go-to meeting or get on a call and help you through that. But I thought it's important that you also understand that there are so many places where you could help, get information to troubleshoot these, right? Any type of license management thing where they didn't send you the file, or you want to have a quick question on license management, you can always call license management directly, right? Just have your sales order number ready, or you can simply email. Many times I've seen emailing them, they just send out the reply, or they just update the license file quickly for you, or you can just call TriStar as well, right? Some of the usual links that I talk about here, right? All our recordings, including this one, are available in our CAD resource. There are a lot of knowledge-based articles that you can take advantage of, and also the Learning Exchange tutorials there, right? So with that said, let me see if there was any questions right here. Let's see, you can start typing your questions there. Okay, so let me get to one by one here. Is there a grace period for lapsed licenses or once your maintenance ends, or are you required to use subscription once maintenance has lapsed? Yeah, so whether you use perpetual or subscription license, they're all kind of tied to the time, right? So for example, once your maintenance or support ends, with perpetual license, you don't get support. You can continue to use your perpetual license. But on the subscription, it's more like you pay for use, right? It's more like a rental pretty much. So yeah, once you are renewing the maintenance, then you get to continue to use that subscription. And even that home use license, it will work only till that time for the subscription. Which is better, Triad or single license server? Great question. During my industry days, I have used Triad license as well, right? And wherein we had several. I mean, it's a larger company. It's not just company. We have it's almost like a fail-safe thing where you have multiple servers handling this license, not just for Creo. We may have several FEA solutions out there. We may even have not just one CAD tool, multiple CAD systems, wherein the Triad is better IT. I mean, it's more of an IT decision in my view. They cannot decide, are we going to go with a Triad or a single, but PTC can support both, right? There are ways to, I mean, there's several documentation there on how to set it up. Even when you create your new hardware asset, you should be able to add the Triad information, and your license server or your license file, when you generate them, it should have information on the MAC ID of all of them. How do you specify the license configuration in a silent install? Okay, that's a great question. So what you do when you do the license configuration is you'll have to, I mean, when you do that silent installation, there's a procedure, you know, I'm sure you have done the silent installation. You know, those PSF files that you have created, right? Remember, you saw a few PSFs and a few batch files. You should be able to go access those and put it in I mean, just select from one client. It's almost like you're doing it once, and then just copying it or maybe putting it across multiple installations in the bin folder. You should be able to do a batch file copy of all that, right? Just batch process this. But yeah, it has to be, it's almost like you're doing it once where you have that available startup and extension license, and then you roll it out to the other clients. If I convert from a perpetual license to a subscription license, how is the big purchase price credited back? So that's a good question. Maybe I'll probably if you could, I'll have our account reps answer that to you on that end. But yeah, it's a good question as to how that works. But yeah, if you could reach out to our account reps, we can definitely help you on that specific question regarding the purchase price. Okay, there's another question here. In our license subscription code, we have a mix of Creo Engineer 3 and 4. As expected, these licenses also appear in our license pack. However, there are licenses in our license pack that do not appear in the subscription and maintenance codes. For example, in our license pack, we have MathCAD tolerance analysis powered by CETOL and Creo Schematics Lite. However, none of these appear in any one of our subscription or maintenance codes. Does this mean we lose them out of the next license pack? You should be, so again, I think I may have answered this question earlier. Remember when I showed you when you type in your sales order number, it should give you the 3 tabs I was talking about, right? Installed licenses, expired, and available. And I think what you're getting at is the expired licenses, right? Does it still continue to show? So the best way to do that is on the license management tool. You could clearly see. I know the CDR, when you import the CDR, or when you ask request for a customer detailed report, right, and a detailed license report from PTC, it'll give you a column where it's expired or active, or it's available but not installed. It'll tell you not installed. Those are the 2 places where you can see it. And then next question. Also understand that we have harness design light. However, I do not find any reference to this in our subscription maintenance quote. So whenever you have the light functionalities, you know, I think when I was showing the presentation, if you remember, the schematics light, I was able to expand the product, and I saw that as a serviceable item. The harness design, or HMX as they call it, that should also be listed under the light. If not, you know, it should be. If you hit the plus symbol, it should be listed there. It may not be in your product package. And something like some of the light tools like Simulate Light or Mannequin Light, I've seen sometimes they're not even listed in the feature. It's more like you have to enable it maybe using a config option, or maybe install Simulate and you have it, right? Those are some exceptions there, but usually it should be displayed under the serviceable item. Okay. Let me see if there are any other questions. Okay, so looks like that's it, and we're almost wrap up time here. So just a quick thing here before we wrap up, just to remind you about those time limit offers from TriStar this quarter on Creo, as well as MathCAD and the workstations, right? And you know, we have an offer on the 3 extensions, as well as training and the Navigate license. Okay, so please reach out to your account reps at TriStar, or you can visit our website. It has more detailed information about these time-limited offers. Okay. All right, so with that, thank you, everyone. Thanks for your time. We look forward to talking to you soon in our next webinar. Until then, all of you have a great rest of the week and a great weekend. And please let us know with any questions you may have. You have our contact information. Please reach out to us with any questions on this webinar or in general on any of those PTC products that we support. Okay. All right. So thank you. Bye.